I don't always play Euro games, but when I do, usually they're about trading in the Mediterranean. And so is the case of the game that I'm telling you about today, which is Serenissima, from one of the ancient names of Venice, one of the ancient ways in which Venice was called, the most serene. That happened back in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Really, the golden age of the trade market and the exchanging of goods in the Mediterranean before the discoveries of the New World and the creation of new ways of navigate to the east created different poles of exchange and different areas around which the market will gravitate. Oh wow, that was a little bit of a digression. Serenissima 2 to 4 players. Players will represent not countries exactly, I believe companies that go around conquering ports, taking control of ports, destroying each other, apparently in complete disregard of international law. It just seems like the Mediterranean is a little bit of a no man's land in this game. But it's what the players do: exchange goods, transfer goods, and transport them around the Mediterranean. Gain money, but they also fight, take control of ports, build forts, and do stuff like that. Let me show you how the game works.
This is the board of the game. It is a mounted board and quite nice looking, if you ask me. It has a little bit of a semi-fake old feel, which I don't mind. At the beginning of the game, each player starts by controlling a port, and here I've set up the game for 4 players to show you how the board may look like at the beginning of the game. To mark the initial control of a port per player, each player will place 3 of these cylinders in the port that the player controls. These cylinders represent sailors. Each player also controls 2 galleys with 3 sailors each on them. Each galley has 5 slots which can be used to load sailors and or goods. But you need to have at least a sailor on a galley. If you don't, the galley counts as sunk and is removed from the board. You have, as I said, ports, and ports have little boxes here with numbers printed on them. These are boxes where you will place the goods that are delivered by the players to the ports. Different colors of blocks represent different goods. There are several possible goods that can be used in the game. Each port is also associated with a card. Genova, for example, has this card here with reminders that are used during scoring. The cards also have 2 sides, one usually without wine on them and the other one with the wine icon on it, and this is the side that you use when your port is producing or storing wine. This is important during scoring purposes, and hey, whoever denied that wine is important when you're scoring points, especially if you want to cheat, then offer a lot of wine to your guests. See that rondelle there? There are blocks on it, and the blocks correspond to the colors of the players. That's the way in which you set up the colors at the beginning of the game. At least the point is that you have a player going first and second, third, fourth, and then you have a second round going in the opposite direction. That means that you will have the first player going last, the second player going second to last, etc., etc. Those cubes that you see there are associated with numbers, which in turn are associated with galleys. That means that during a turn, this pawn here is moved around this rondelle here, and it indicates, one space at a time, it indicates the galley that will activate. Turn 1, or first phase of the first turn, it moves on the 1 space, then the galley number 1, belonging to the light blue player, is activated. Each galley is associated with a number. That galley activates, the player resolves the activation, then you move that to 2, and now it is time for galley 2 belonging to the red player to go. Very simple thing. More galleys can be bought, then they're associated with numbers and colors, of course, and then the color cubes corresponding to the owning player are placed there. Galleys can be sunk. In that case, the cube is removed. Pretty simple stuff. Pretty simple way of activating things and keeping track of the order of the activations. Now, however, what do you do when it is your turn to activate? Very good question, thank you for asking. Back to the big picture here. The active galley can take up to 3 actions. The actions are in order: loading, movement, and sail or battle. You could also see these as 3 phases in each activation, but the galley doesn't have to take them all. Loading. The active galley can load sailors from a port into the galley, sailors belonging to the active player, of course, or you can trade, you can move around sailors between your own galleys. You can also load goods, which is pretty important. In ports, you can load the good produced by that port. For example, Sicilia produces gold, Tunis produces marble, Ragusa produces wine. You load it, that's it. But you have to pay, depends. If you load a good from a port that you control, then the first cube that you load is for free, and starting from the second cube, you spend a coin. There are coins in the game. A coin per cube. So the first is free, and the other ones aren't. If you are loading from a neutral port that no player controls, then you spend a coin per cube, and that money goes to the bank. But if you're loading from a port belonging to another player, then you still spend a coin per cube, but you have to give the money to the owning player. That's for the loading thing. Remember, you always have to have at least a sailor on your ship. Then the active galley can move. The galley moves up to a number of areas equal to the number of sailors on the galley. This galley could move by 3 areas, and this one too. Well, pretty much all the galleys at the beginning of the game. As you move, you may encounter galleys belonging to the enemy, and in that case, a battle may follow. Also, because if you enter an area where the opponent has more sailors than you do, then the opponent can choose to blockade you, can declare blockade, your movement ends there, and then you choose whether you want to fight or not. In that case, I don't think the fight would be all that smart for the orange player, but who knows. After moving is done, you have sail or battle. Let's be friendly. Let's start with sales, where you sell stuff. What can you sell? Well, you can sell whatever it is that you are carrying, and you can unload it in a port, as long as it is not the same good that is produced by the port, because hey, they have already that. When you're unloading, when you're selling something in a port, you place the cube of the good that you're selling from your galley to the lowest number space on the board. If you are doing that in a port that doesn't belong to you, you get that amount of coins. For example, in that case, you will get 2. But if you do that, if you unload goods in your own port, then alas, you don't get anything. But it improves your situation because it will allow you to score things later. Also, you cannot unload the same good twice. So when you're unloading stuff in a port, it has to be stuff that is not in the warehouses of the port yet. If you unload spices, that is worth 2 extra coins. And if you unload wine, then the place becomes a place where people drink wine and consume wine and enjoy wine. Hooray! Which, as you know, always makes people happy. So you look for the card of the port. In this case, we have Sicilia, and you simply flip the card of that port to its wine side. And if there are enemy ships in the area and the enemy has numerical superiority, the enemy can decide to declare a blockade against against sails too, not just against movement. Okay, but what happens indeed during the battle phase? If after movement the active player decides to engage in battle instead of engaging in a sail? Very simple. You use these combat dice, which have 3 blank sides and 3 skulls on them, and the players roll a number of dice equal to the number of sailors that they have on the ship, with one exception. The defender rolls that number. For example, suppose that the black player is the defender, then we have these. The attacker, suppose the orange player is the attacker, rolls a number of dice equal to the number of sailors minus the number of spaces that were traveled to reach the final destination. I move by 1, I have 3 sailors, then I attack with 2, the defender defends with 3. We roll dice. See, not very good for the orange player. And the players inflict a number of casualties on the opponent equal to the number of skulls that they rolled. In this case, the black player inflicts 2 skulls, 2 damages against the orange player, who loses 2 sailors, and the black player doesn't lose anything. After the first round of combat, the attacker can choose to attack more, to attack further, but as you can see, that may not necessarily be a good idea. In this case, probably wouldn't. You can follow a similar procedure against a port when you're attacking a port, if you want to take control of the port. In which case, simply again, you roll dice equal to the number of sailors involved. If the area that you're attacking has enemy galleys and people in the port and you want to attack the port, you obviously have to defeat the galleys first. But if the port is neutral, if it doesn't belong to any player, then you take control of it simply by disembarking sailors from your ship to the port, like the black player would be allowed to do that. However, instead of using the galley, you could also use your turn, your activation, to do something else in tally, which is to do investment. That is when you invest resources. You can recruit new sailors at the cost of 1 per coin. You could purchase a new galley at the cost of a coin per galley that you already own. You have 2, you want to buy a third, then it's 2 coins. You could choose to build a fort. A fort will give you defensive advantages. If you're defending in a port that you control, then the fort gives you a free shot against the opponent before the battle against the port is resolved. You could choose also to purchase for your port a basilica. Oh, by the way, the fort also requires some special materials. You need to have wood and stone in there. So actually, that wouldn't be, you wouldn't be able to build a fort there. That's just an example. The basilica requires marble and gold, costs 2 coins, and so does the fort. And when you place it, it has no immediate advantage, but it will help you during scoring. So you continue like this, activation after activation, and you can activate the galley to take those 3 steps, or up to 3 steps, or you can do investment. When all galleys have had the chance to activate, you go back to the beginning of the track and you flip a card from this deck here. That cards are shuffled at the beginning of the game. The result may be wine. This allows players that control wine, that produce wine, to make money. Or you can have hourglass symbols, and when you have one of these, you simply move that marker there on the turn track. 1 hourglass is 1 space, 2 spaces, 1 space, 2 spaces. This symbol also means that when this card is drawn, you reshuffle this mini deck here. When you move this pawn here, which starts here when you're playing with 4 players, when you move it, you will score each time that the pawn reaches or goes past a yellow spot. If you're playing with 2 or 3 players, then you start from here and you use red spaces as scoring spaces. When scoring happens, well, hooray! When you score, you look at the cards for the ports that you control, and this little table tells you the amount of money that you gained based on the number of goods that you have in your own ports. Suppose that I have 3 goods in Genova, then 1, 2, 3, I get 10 coins. 4 goods, 15, 5 goods, 20. During the scoring round, also the basilicas that you control will score 5 points for you, which means will grant you 5 ducats, 5 coins. The game continues until 3 scoring rounds. At that point, game is over, the richest player is the winner, and if there is a tie there, the player that controls most ports is the winner.
This may not be my favorite Euro game, but it is also far from being my least liked one. There are things that I like about it. I like the components, I think they look nice, I like the little plastic galleys, I like the wooden components, of course in Euro games that's not surprising to have, but I like the little cylinders, the cubes, or, well, cubes. I like the way they look on the board, and I like all the colors that you have on the board. The Euro gamey mechanics I like. I like changing things, moving things around, transporting, working around the system to create good combinations of colors, to optimize transportation, to figure out ways of, well, bringing the best goods to the best places in the best moment. And also, you really have a lot of options here from transporting things, and you can choose a lot of things you can transport, a lot of places where you can transport them, and a lot of ways in which you can invest your money. You will probably have a phase initially where the players are putting together their capital, creating some basic resources, and once general areas on the board have been established, let's say control of general areas has been established, and players will start developing more complex things such as basilicas. They'll probably want to defend some of their most treasured possessions by building forts if they have enough money and actions, so that the rich ports are not taken away before scoring happens. I like also the fact that scoring, you don't know exactly when it's going to happen. You can kind of see when it is likely to be, but with the fact that the deck may be reshuffled at random moments, there are still surprises there. I liked all of these elements. I found, for example, that the scoring system, you don't know when you're going to score, adds enough unpredictability to the Euro gaming mechanics to make the game not stiffy, to create a good sense of momentum as the players are strategizing about the economy and about moving ships the right number of spaces and spending the right number of money to execute certain actions. The combat system, you know that I play a lot of war games, so maybe you would expect that would be my favorite part in the game. It is actually my least liked part, the part that I really like the least. There's something excessively random about. I like games with randomness. I like war games with a lot of randomness, actually. But when I play Euro games, very often what's a problem for me is games where you do not roll dice too many times, you do not roll dice every turn, but when you do, the results are really important and really unpredictable, and a couple of bad rolls may create disadvantages which are not easy to come back from. There are ways in which the game balances itself here, but overall you still have this idea. Not too many die rolls, but extremely important ones. In this sense, the game reminded me of Blockade Runner, which I played a couple of years ago. The similarities are striking, but I do believe the Blockade Runner came out after this game, at least after the first edition. What I'm reviewing today is the second edition. So I have a little bit of a problem there, and in this game I just try not to fight too much if I can avoid it, because just so much randomness. You build and strategize things rationally, you plan, invest, reinvest, and then just a big stroke of bad luck creates a lot of damage, which just throws everything away. In conclusion, this is far from being a bad game. It is a game that, to me, could be better if these two elements were somehow combined together better. I don't know how that could be done, but if it were, I think that the game would be more appealing to me. As it is now, it is a good looking game, which is not hard to teach, which definitely appeals to players. To me, however, it falls a little bit in between of categories in which there are the games that do things better. It does take a little bit to play this game. It is not a quick filler. But if I am to set up a game which is meaty and that really engages players in some deep thinking and figuring out options among many possible ways of spending actions, then I would prefer more complex and meatier games, such as, for example, Trajan, which happens to be one of my favorite Euro games. I think that Trajan for me really set the bar pretty high. And if I want to play something quick and easy, there are other games that definitely would fit the bill better than this game. To me, this game is big enough to be a big course in a game night, but not appealing enough to really be a strong contender to other games that are in that category. If you play Euro games all the time, then you probably want some variety. You do not want to play the same game over and over again. Then I see how Serenissima would definitely have a place in your collection and in your gaming experience and in your gaming group. It may be a game that rotates among other games and that you play occasionally, and it's a nice break from whatever other game about trading that you are playing. As for me, I play Euro games so occasionally that I guess paradoxically I happen to be and a bit selective, maybe more selective than most, precisely because I don't play them very often. I don't have to play them very often. When I happen to play them, then I want games that are either very meaty, or very meaty, deep, or very light and fun and just entertaining. Bottom line, Serenissima. We play a lot of games. This is a game that is not too hard, not too light, so it definitely will fit a certain type of bill. I like it. I could probably like it better, but as it stands, it is a good game. One that I enjoy playing. I would definitely not mind playing it in the future, but it won't probably be my first choice either.